It might not look like much, but this 139-year-old doorway on Goulston Street here in Whitechapel was known in Victorian times as the entrance of 108 to 119 Wentworth dwellings, and, believe it or not, it's one of the most infamous spots in all of true crime. At 2:20 in the morning on Sunday the 30th of September 1888, 33-year-old Metropolitan Police Officer Alfred Long was making his way around his beat when he arrived here at this doorway. Long was actually an A Division police officer, which meant that his beat usually took him around the streets of Whitehall near Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament, but he'd been drafted into Whitechapel's H Division to assist in the hunt for the Whitechapel murderer, who would later become known as Jack the Ripper. With 3 weeks having passed since the murder of Annie Chapman on Hanbury Street, however, the killer seemed to be laying low. All was quiet on Goulston Street, and so Long continued south through the darkness towards Whitechapel High Street, but by the time he arrived back here at 2:55 a.m, he'd been made aware that the killer had struck again. 2 women had been murdered in 2 separate incidents, and chance alone had prevented Long from seeing him. Around half a mile southeast on Burner Street, 44-year-old Elizabeth Stride had been discovered first at just after 1 a.m, lying on her back in the mud in Dutfield's yard with her throat cut violently and her body posed to await its discovery. The killer had removed the hat she was wearing, scattered a packet of breath mints around her body, and smeared the blood from a throat wound across her hand and her forearm. At 1:44 a.m, 46-year-old Catherine Eddowes had then been found, only moments west of Goulston Street in the south corner of Mitre Square. She was lying in a similar manner as Elizabeth Stride was, but the killer had pulled her intestines from inside her and, after removing her womb and left kidney, had taken them from the crime scene along with almost half of a white apron she'd been wearing. It wasn't the first time he'd done that. Back on the 7th of August in George Yard, he'd also torn away part of Martha Tabram's clothing and had similarly taken it with him. Long, anyway, stepped into the doorway and then, by the light of his lantern, discovered the missing section of Catherine's apron lying a few yards in on the right-hand side beside the base of a staircase that led to the upper floors. It was covered in blood and fecal matter, he would remember, but then, on looking at the right-hand wall, he discovered something else. On the black bricks in white chalk, someone had left him a message. "The Jews," it said, "are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." What exactly that meant was never determined, and to this day, the killer has never been identified. I'll see you back here next week for another Morbid Monday.